I never wanted to be a forest ranger. Growing up in Milwaukee, the most nature I ever experienced was the small park 3 blocks from our apartment where my mother would take me to play on weekends. But life has a way of redirecting your path when you least expect it. After my mother passed away during my sophomore year of college, I dropped out. The grief was too much, and the mounting student debt without her support made continuing impossible. My uncle Jim, who'd been a ranger at Chequamegon-Nicolet National Forest in northern Wisconsin for nearly 30 years, offered me a job as a seasonal assistant. "Fresh air will do you good," he said. "Clear your head." That was 5 years ago. I never left. There's something about the forest that gets under your skin. The way the light filters through the canopy, creating patterns on the forest floor that shift and dance with the breeze. The smell of pine and damp earth after rainfall. The absolute silence that sometimes falls when even the birds stop singing. Most people never experience true silence. Cities hum with constant background noise, traffic, air conditioners, distant conversations. Even small towns have their ambient sounds. But deep in the forest, miles from any road or trail, when the wind dies down and the wildlife goes quiet, there's a silence so complete it feels like pressure against your eardrums. It was during one of these silences that I first heard it. September is usually my favorite month in the forest. The summer tourists have mostly gone home, the leaves are just beginning to turn, and the air takes on a crisp quality that makes everything feel more alive. I was doing a routine patrol of the eastern sector, checking on some of our more remote campsites before the winter closed them down. I'd been hiking for about 6 hours when I reached the old fire tower. It's one of those skeletal metal structures built in the 1930s, rising about 80 feet above a ridge that offers views across miles of unbroken forest. The tower had been decommissioned decades ago, but we still maintained it as a historical landmark. Occasionally, I'd climb up just to enjoy the view and eat my lunch. That day, the forest was unusually quiet. No wind, no birdsong. Even the insects seemed to be holding their breath. I remember checking my watch, 2:17 p.m., and thinking it was strange for everything to be so still in the middle of the afternoon. As I sat on the metal platform at the top of the tower, unwrapping my sandwich, I heard what sounded like my name being called from somewhere in the trees below. "Mark." It was faint, almost imperceptible. I stopped moving, sandwich halfway in my mouth, and listened. Nothing. I must have imagined it, I thought. The wind playing tricks. Except there was no wind. I finished my lunch quickly, suddenly feeling exposed up in the tower. As I started my descent, I heard it again. "Mark, help us." A woman's voice, thin and distant, but unmistakable this time. I froze on the metal staircase, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Hello," I called out. "Is someone there? Do you need help?" My voice sounded flat in the dead air, as if the trees were absorbing the sound. No response came. I hurried down the remaining stairs, my boots clanging loudly on the metal. At the base of the tower, I dropped my pack and grabbed my radio. "Base, this is Ranger Holloway at Lookout Tower 7. I may have heard someone calling for help in the vicinity. Any reports of missing hikers?" "Over." The radio crackled. "Negative, Ranger Holloway. No missing persons reported today. Are you sure about what you heard?" "Over." I wasn't sure anymore. Possibly an echo or animal sound. "I'll investigate the immediate area." "Over." "Proceed with caution. Check in every 30 minutes." "Over." "Will do." Over and out. I spent the next hour searching the area around the tower, calling out periodically. The forest remained unnaturally silent, and I found no signs of anyone having passed through recently, no footprints, no disturbed vegetation, no forgotten items. Eventually, I convinced myself I had imagined it. Stress and solitude can do strange things to the mind. I resumed my patrol route, but a sense of unease followed me for the rest of the day. That night, back at my cabin, I couldn't shake the memory of that voice. It had sounded so desperate, so genuine. I told myself it was probably just the wind after all, or perhaps a bird call that my brain had interpreted as words, a common enough phenomenon among people who spend too much time alone in the wilderness. I should have trusted my instincts. 3 days later, I was assigned to check on Blackwater Creek, where we'd had reports of illegal camping. The creek runs through one of the more remote areas of the forest, about 4 hours' hike from the nearest access road. It's beautiful country but difficult terrain, dense underbrush, steep ravines, and few landmarks to navigate by. Most recreational hikers avoid it. The day started normally enough. Clear skies, cool air, a light breeze rustling the leaves. I made good time, reaching the creek by midday. There were no signs of camping, legal or otherwise, but I did notice something odd. No animal tracks along the muddy banks, not even deer. In September, the creek should have been a busy place for wildlife coming to drink. I followed the creek upstream for about a mile, documenting the lack of activity in my field notebook and taking water samples for our monthly quality testing. Around 2 p.m., I found myself in a small clearing where the creek widened into a shallow pool. Ancient hemlocks surrounded the area, their massive trunks covered in moss, their branches creating a cathedral-like canopy overhead. That's when the silence fell again. One moment, there was the gentle gurgle of the creek, the distant tapping of a woodpecker, the whisper of leaves overhead, and the next, absolute stillness. The air seemed to thicken, making it slightly harder to breathe. "Mark, we've been waiting." The voice came from behind me, closer this time, a woman's voice but different from the one at the tower, deeper, older somehow. I spun around, my hand instinctively going to the bear spray on my belt. No one was there. Just trees and shadows. "Who's there?" I called, trying to keep my voice steady. "This is Forest Ranger Mark Holloway. Identify yourself." Silence. Even the creek seemed to have stopped its murmuring. I took a step backward, then another. My heels struck a root, and I nearly fell. When I regained my balance, I noticed something on the ground about 20 feet away, partially hidden by ferns, a splash of unnatural color against the forest floor. Moving closer, I realized it was a backpack. Red nylon, weather-beaten and dirty, as if it had been there for some time. I approached cautiously, scanning the surrounding area for any signs of its owner. The backpack was leaning against the base of a tree, positioned as if someone had carefully placed it there rather than dropped it in haste. I called out once more, announcing myself as a ranger, but received no response. Using a stick, I carefully opened the main compartment of the backpack. Inside were the expected items: a water bottle now empty, a first aid kit, a flashlight with dead batteries, a map of the forest, folded neatly, and a wallet. I hesitated before checking the wallet, knowing I was potentially disturbing evidence if this was indeed a missing person case. But I needed to identify the owner. The driver's license belonged to a woman named Catherine Merrill from Minneapolis. According to the issue date, she was 43 years old. I didn't recognize her name from any recent missing persons reports, but something about her face in the photo seemed vaguely familiar. As I slipped the license back into the wallet, I noticed a small notebook tucked into one of the backpack's side pockets. The cover was water-stained, but the pages inside were mostly intact. I opened it to the first entry. September 12th, finally made it to Chequamegon, Nicolet. Weather perfect. Campsite 14 has amazing views. Plan to hike to Blackwater Creek tomorrow. Rangers say it's isolated but beautiful. The date was from 3 years ago. I flipped through more pages, reading quickly. September 13th, found the most incredible spot along the creek today. Ancient trees, so peaceful. Heard strange sounds last night, probably just an animal. September 14th, slept poorly. The silence woke me up several times. How can silence wake you? It's like all sound was suddenly sucked out of the world. Going to explore upstream today. September 15th, I'm not alone here. Saw someone watching me from the trees today. When I called out, they disappeared. Too far from trunk to be a ranger. No gear either. The entries continued for several more days, becoming increasingly disjointed and paranoid. The handwriting changed too, growing more frantic and uneven. September 18th, they're getting closer. Only come during the silence. Can hear them whispering my name. Not going to make it back to camp tonight. Will try to reach Ranger Station tomorrow. The final entry sent a chill down my spine. They say they need help. They're trapped here. Need a way out. Need a body to... The sentence cut off abruptly, a long scrawl of ink trailing off the page, as if her hand had been suddenly pulled away. My radio crackled to life, making me jump. Ranger Holloway, this is base. Status check. Over. I fumbled with the radio, my hands shaking slightly. Base, this is Holloway. I've found an abandoned backpack at Blackwater Creek, possibly belonging to a missing hiker. Name Catherine Merrill from Minneapolis. Can you run that name? Over. There was a pause, longer than usual, before the response came. Stand by, Holloway. I waited, the silence of the forest pressing in around me. After about 5 minutes, the radio crackled again. Holloway, return to base immediately. Leave the backpack where you found it and mark the location. Over. The terse response and lack of explanation set off alarm bells. Base, can you clarify? Is Merrill a reported missing person? Over. Another pause, then affirmative. Missing person case from 3 years ago. Search was extensive but unsuccessful. Ranger Holloway, I repeat, return to base immediately. Over. Understood. Leaving now. Over and out. I marked the location on my GPS and with some surveyor's tape on a nearby branch. As I prepared to leave, I took one last look at the backpack. Something about it bothered me. It looked too clean for having supposedly been in the elements for 3 years. Weather-beaten, yes, but not decayed or animal damaged as it should have been. I was about 2 miles from the backpack site when the forest went silent again. This time, I stopped walking immediately, turning slowly in a circle, scanning the trees around me. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Mark, don't leave us. The voice, Catherine's voice, I somehow knew, came from directly behind me. I whirled around, heart pounding. Nothing. Just trees and undergrowth and lengthening shadows as the afternoon waned. We need you. Another voice, male this time, from somewhere to my left. Just like we needed her. A third voice to my right. I broke into a run, abandoning the trail, and crashing through the underbrush, branches whipping at my face. I could hear them moving through the forest around me, not behind me, but alongside me, keeping pace effortlessly. You can't leave, Mark. No one ever really leaves. We've been waiting so long. The voices came from everywhere and nowhere, surrounding me as I ran. I tripped over a root and fell hard, the breath knocked from my lungs. As I gasped for air, the forest around me went completely, utterly still. Not a leaf moved, not a branch creaked. Slowly I raised my head. Standing in a loose semicircle about 20 feet away were 3 figures. They looked like ordinary people at first glance, a middle-aged woman with short gray hair, a young man in hiking clothes, and an older man in what appeared to be an outdated ranger uniform. But as I stared, I realized I could see through them, not clearly, but as if they were made of dense fog or smoke. The woman, Catherine Merrill, I presumed, took a step toward me. Her mouth moved, but the voice I heard didn't seem to come from her, but from the air around me. You hear us. You see us. That means you belong with us now. I scrambled backward, my hand finding a fallen branch. I brandished it in front of me, though I somehow knew it would be useless against whatever these things were. What do you want? I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. The male ranger figure smiled, an expression that contained no warmth. Company. This forest takes people sometimes, said the younger man. Has for centuries. The Ojibwe knew. They called this place the Silent Land. We're trapped, Catherine said. Between worlds. Not living, not dead. Just here. But we found a way out, the ranger added. Through you. I continued backing away, getting to my feet slowly. I don't understand. Catherine's form flickered like a television with poor reception. We need a body. A living vessel. Yours will do nicely. They began moving toward me in unison, their movements jerky and unnatural, like film played at the wrong speed. I turned and ran again, no longer caring about direction, just desperate to put distance between myself and those apparitions. The light was fading fast now, the forest growing darker by the minute. I knew I needed to find the trail again to orient myself, but panic had taken over. I splashed across a shallow stream, scrambled up a steep embankment, and crashed through a thicket of young maples. And then, suddenly, I was back at the clearing with the pool. The red backpack still leaned against the tree where I'd found it. Somehow, I had run in a circle, despite traveling in what I thought was a straight line away from this place. The three figures stood at the edge of the clearing, watching me. They didn't advance, but simply stood, waiting, as if they knew I had nowhere left to go. My radio had gone silent, not just lacking transmission, but completely dead. My GPS showed only an error message. Night was falling rapidly now, the forest growing darker around me. I backed toward the creek, my mind racing. The figures remained at the tree line, watching. Then Catherine raised her arm and pointed to something behind me. Against my better judgment, I glanced over my shoulder. There, emerging from the creek, was another figure. Water streamed from clothing that looked decades out of date, a woman in a long skirt and high-neck blouse, her hair pinned up in an old-fashioned style. Her eyes were black voids in a face that might once have been beautiful. "Welcome home, Mark," she said, her voice like dry leaves scraping across stone. I looked back toward the trees, but the other three figures had vanished. When I turned again, the woman from the creek was just feet away, her hand outstretched toward my face. I did the only thing I could think of. I lit a fire. My hands shaking violently, I pulled the emergency fire starter from my pack and gathered what dry material I could find. The woman from the creek retreated slightly as the first flames flickered to life, her form seeming to waver in the firelight. I fed the fire quickly, building it larger than safety protocols would normally allow. As the flames grew, I noticed the oppressive silence beginning to lift. From somewhere in the distance, I heard an owl call. The ghostly woman hissed, a sound like steam escaping a pressure valve. The fire cast strange shadows across her face, making her features shift and change. "Fire is temporary," she said. "We are patient. We have existed here for generations. We will exist for generations more." "What are you?" I managed to ask. "We are the lost, the taken, the forgotten." She moved around the fire, always keeping just outside the circle of light. "Every few years, the forest needs new blood, new memories, new souls. Why me? You hear us. You see us. Few do. Those who can are suitable." I kept feeding the fire, using nearly all my available fuel. The ghostly woman continued to circle, sometimes joined by glimpses of the others at the edge of the light. I'm not sure how long I sat there, feeding the fire, fighting exhaustion. Hours passed. The moon rose and set, and still they waited, patient and relentless. When false dawn began to lighten the sky, they finally retreated, fading into the trees like morning mist. I waited until full daylight before stamping out the remains of my fire and starting the long hike back to the ranger station. I reported everything when I returned: the backpack, the journal, the apparitions. My supervisor listened carefully, then had me speak with the forest superintendent and a representative from the state police. They were particularly interested in the backpack, sending a team to recover it immediately. 2 days later, I was informed that the backpack was indeed identified as belonging to Catherine Merrill, a hiker who had gone missing in the forest 3 years earlier. What they couldn't explain was how the backpack appeared in relatively good condition after so much time exposed to the elements. They also couldn't explain why, when they pulled her driver's license from the wallet inside the backpack, the photograph showed a completely different woman than the one I had seen. The journal contained no writing at all. Every page was blank. I requested a transfer the following week. They sent me to a small ranger station in the Ozarks, about as far from Chequamegon-Nicolet as I could get while staying within the National Forest Service. But it doesn't matter. They followed me. I hear them sometimes in the silence between the trees, calling my name, waiting. They're patient, and they know that eventually I'll answer. Sometimes on patrol, I'll find items left on the trail, a woman's hairpin of antique design, a ranger's badge from the 1950s, a modern hiking boot with no signs of wear. Reminders that they're still with me. Last week, a hiker reported hearing someone calling for help deep in a remote section of forest where no one should have been. When I asked for a description of the voice, he said it sounded like a man, probably middle-aged. He kept saying the same thing over and over, the hiker told me. He said, "My name is Mark. Please help me. I'm trapped here. I've put in for early retirement. I don't think it will help." Some nights, I wake to find muddy footprints leading from my door to my bedside, evaporating like morning dew as I watch. They're getting closer. And the forest is so very patient.